Hello, it's March 14th and welcome to The New Arab Weekly, a brand new show from The New Arab in London. Each week we break down the biggest stories of the week coming from the Middle East and North Africa and ask what happened and what does it all mean. Joining us for our inaugural episode we have The New Arab's opinion editor Nadine Talat.
Hi.
And New Arab journalist and reporter Oliver Mizzi.
Hey.
We've got 3 stories for you this week. Let's get going. Nadine, you're up first. What have you got for us?
So let's start off by talking about aid. A ship carrying vital humanitarian aid for Gaza departed from Cyprus this week and is expected to reach Gaza soon. The ship is the first to test a new humanitarian sea corridor that's been set up to reach Gaza's starving population. The move comes after senior EU officials said that starvation was being used as a weapon of war, and hopefully this ship is going to be the first of many.
In relation to the humanitarian corridor, this is an initiative that has been intended to try and help the people in Gaza. And today we had the first departure of a vessel from Cyprus. If things go according to plan, we are hoping that we will be complementing and adding to the capacity of the international community to try and meet the consequences of this humanitarian catastrophe.
That was Konstantinos Kombos, the Cyprus foreign minister. So the ship that just left Cyprus is run by Spanish NGO Open Arms and is carrying about 200 tons of food, which is about enough for 500,000 meals. Now keep in mind the population of Gaza is somewhere between 2.2 and 2.3 million people, all of whom are hungry and surviving on little food. A lot of them have been forced to eat either spoiled food or animal feed just to survive. And more than 500,000 people are literally facing starvation. In the past couple of weeks, at least 27 people, including 23 children, have already died of starvation in Gaza.
Obviously, there was a lot of talk about getting food in across the border from Israel through aid trucks, UNRWA, whatnot. Everything now seems to be on the sea. Have they just given the difficulties of getting in? Have they now just given up on land crossing altogether?
They haven't given
naval stuff.
No, they haven't given up on it, but it has been extremely difficult. I mean, Gaza's humanitarian needs are massive. I think just before the war started, Gaza required about 500 trucks of aid every single day just to meet the needs of its population. And obviously that number now is so much bigger given the humanitarian catastrophe it's facing. So there are definitely efforts to try to get aid in by land. I mean, as you know, there's efforts to get aid in by air. But I think this humanitarian sea corridor is just an effort to get in as much aid as possible. Of course, it's barely going to make a dent in the starvation crisis that's facing Gaza. As we said, it's barely enough for about 500,000 meals, and there's 2.3 million people in Gaza that need food.
Yeah, on that note, the US has said that the seaport is going to take 60 days to build. So, surely, aid has to be scaled up, regardless of whether that's via sea, or via land.
Yeah. I mean, to explain, last week, U.S. President Joe Biden announced that the U.S. is going to build a temporary port off of Gaza to help facilitate aid. But it will take about 60 days. And even then, it's not very clear how it would be distributed, what the logistics of it are. The aid will need to be checked by Israel, and there's no guarantee that Israel will let it go through. Essentially, all of this is just a drop in the ocean, a very small fraction of the humanitarian needs that Gaza has at the moment. And I think one question that a lot of people have been asking as a result of Biden's announcement that they're building a port is, why is there no port in Gaza already? And I think to answer that question, you have to look at Israel's occupation and specifically the 16 or 17-year-long blockade that Israel has enforced, where it essentially has controlled everything that goes in and out of Gaza by land, sea, air for 17 years. And since October 7th, we've seen that they've basically shut down and not let any humanitarian aid, any food, any water, any fuel, any medical supplies into Gaza. So Gaza is entirely dependent on Israel. And Israel has the final say on what goes in and out and has used that very strategically, has used starvation, has used dehydration, has used, the lack of medical supplies as a weapon in this war against Gaza.
As a follow-up to Israeli restrictions on aid coming in, since they're going to be checking all of the aid entry into Gaza that comes via Cyprus with the sea corridor, and the UN has already complained about dual-use restrictions that are being implemented by Israel. Surely, even if there's going to be a sea corridor, the problem will still persist. If these restrictions aren't, stopped, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think not only will the problem still persist, but one thing that a lot of people have been saying, which is absolutely true, is that in some ways it is in Israel's interest to allow this humanitarian aid into Gaza, because it will help alleviate some of the criticisms it's been getting, while at the same time helping Israel outsource its occupation, which we know is always the long-term goal that Israel has. Especially we've seen it in the West Bank with outsourcing it to the PA. But outsourcing the occupation is basically Israel's way of pushing responsibility for the well-being of Gaza's population off of its shoulders onto the shoulders of the international community, NGOs, maybe the rest of the Arab world. And that really helps Israel to make this occupation perpetual and make it cheap, doesn't have to spend any money, and basically wipes its hands clean of what happens to Gaza's population by saying, well, the international community has to deliver aid. It's not our fault, right? They're starving, even though we're the ones imposing the siege.
And who are legally obligated to provide the aid.
Yeah, under international law as an occupying power, it's their responsibility, right? So I mean, I think we have to wait and see exactly how Israel is going to react. I think it's maybe... I think given the fact that this initiative is being led by the U.S., I imagine this would never have been done without the prior approval, at least implicit approval of Israel. But that doesn't mean that, this is in any way adequate to address the humanitarian crisis that Gaza is facing.
I think now, obviously we've all been reporting on this for a number of months. And I think since probably, December time, I've had loads of people in interviews say to me, the violence is terrible and, thousands of people are dying. It's awful. But when all is said and done, more people will be dying from, hunger and starvation and disease than the violence will ever kill. And it seems like those sort of predictions are now coming true.
Yeah, I was about to say, recently there have been reports that people are starving in the north. I mean, these are a couple of dozen at the moment, but it's going to get obviously worse, given the fact that aid isn't being scaled up at a rapid rate. And, with the port, a 60-day delay, well, that's 60 days opportunity for more people to starve, right? And then with the diseases as well, I remember reading a UN statistic. It was something really, mind-boggling, nearly 1 million people have at least one infectious disease or something ridiculous like that, right? Like the proliferation of disease, which isn't really being talked about at the moment, is obviously in Gaza as well. And so even if military operations do decrease, there's going to be an influx, or not an influx, but an increase in the amount of people that will have been, I guess you could say, killed by the humanitarian catastrophe that has been brought on the enclave.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think even if fighting were to stop immediately today, there will be tens of thousands of people who will die from kind of the more indirect. I think it's hard to say indirect when it is so enforced, but the causes like starvation, dehydration, malnutrition, disease, injuries that have been left untreated for far too long. So, I think this is all part of the next phase of Israel's war, which is less direct violence, but I think death on a scale that we haven't seen yet if this continues.
I think it's about making the Gaza Strip unlivable.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do hope, one of the things I do hope this humanitarian crisis does do is highlight the dual-use items that Israel bans now, but has always banned, even well before October 7th, which I think, currently they're banning tents, oxygen concentrators, water testing kits, water filters, solar panel refrigerators, medical kits used for delivering babies, which are by their definition, dual-use items and could have, I'm doing air quotes here, and could have a military purpose, which I mean has always been, such a thorn in the side of the people of Gaza in terms of getting stuff in and what they are and not allowed in. So I do hope that sort of all this brings that to light.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough conversations about that, I think, at the moment, because some of the most dire needs are simply food. That has been a lot of the focus, and I know that, for example, with this ship that's carrying aid, it is entirely food supplies. But I think the other important thing to say is that, it's one thing to get food supplies to Gaza, and it's another thing entirely to distribute it in a safe way. And what we've seen in the past couple of weeks are just absolutely horrible instances of Israel using food delivery as an opportunity to then target Palestinians. We've seen just in the past couple of weeks Israel bombing humanitarian aid warehouses where Palestinians were going to get food, where food was being stored. We've seen Israeli soldiers opening fire on Palestinians queuing just to get a bag of flour to feed their hungry families. Obviously, some countries like the US and Jordan and others have been doing airdrops over Gaza, but this is extremely unreliable and unsafe because a lot of the time the aid falls in dangerous areas that are controlled by the military, or falls into the ocean, or even falls on Palestinians, killing them, which happened recently where 5 Palestinians died because of a parachute fail. So, aid distribution is extremely risky, and Israel has done everything in its power to not just not allow aid into Gaza, but then make it as dangerous as possible for Palestinians to access that aid. I think the other thing that needs to be part of this conversation is the elephant in the room, which is the hypocrisy of Western states, countries of the EU and the US, that are now very concerned about Gaza civilians and wanting to send aid, but have actually been the biggest enablers of Israel's war, right? And I think a big part of that is UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestinian refugees, which is a lifeline to millions of people in Gaza. And in January, several EU countries and the US cut funding to UNRWA after essentially unsubstantiated claims by Israel that some of their members had been involved in the Hamas attack, allegations that now seem to be obtained under torture, essentially. I don't think that hypocrisy is lost on anyone. Everybody has been calling it out. It's very hypocritical to continue to send weapons to Israel, to block calls for a ceasefire on an international level, and then, express concern over civilians in Gaza.
It is astonishing. I don't know how surprised I am by it all, though.
I think when you've been paying attention, it's hard to still be surprised. So, yeah, I don't blame you for not being surprised. I think it's being used as a distraction, essentially, to kind of take attention away from continuing to enable the war by kind of offering small grains of humanitarian aid here and there.
Our second story today from you, Ollie. I think you're staying in Gaza, correct?
Yes, yeah, I am indeed. Because so many things happen in Gaza that it's really hard to keep count of everything. But this time we're moving on to Rafah. And Israeli attacks on Rafah have continued amid anticipation that the military will conduct an invasion of the city. And obviously Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted and doubled down on such an operation. So on Wednesday, an Israeli airstrike hit an UNRWA distribution center, killing 5 and wounding 22 people, including a UNRWA staff member. Felipe Lazzarini said that the attacks on UNRWA facilities had, quote, become commonplace in blatant disregard to international humanitarian law. The Israeli military said that it had conducted a strike against a Hamas official named Mohammed Abu Hasna, who had been a, quote, combat support operative based in Rafah. And his name was listed in the health ministry as one of 5 who were killed, and that list also includes a 15-year-old boy. So hardly precise, really. Yeah. There are some 1.5 million people that are in Rafah, according to the United Nations, the vast majority of whom have been displaced from other areas of the Gaza Strip. Around 250,000 people was the population of Rafah before the war started. So it's an extremely inflated figure, really. Now, speaking to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, also known as AIPAC, Netanyahu doubled down on said invasion.
Hamas will regroup, rearm, and reconquer Gaza. And then we're back to square one. And that's an intolerable threat that we cannot accept.
So as well as saying that they will go into Rafah, he also said that none of these pressures will stop us, referring to the international pressure against Israel to not conduct such an operation. And he also added that Israel's survival was at stake.
This has now been going on for a while, this sort of will they, won't they, into Rafah assault. And it seems to me that they very much want to do this. And it's not a question of will they, won't they. It's like, what can actually stop them? Because they will do it. Given the opportunity, they will do it. But is there anything actually out there that we think that can stop them now?
So this is quite interesting in the sense that there is also a matter of will they, won't they regarding pressure on them, particularly from the Biden administration. So obviously there's a lot of leaks that come out regarding what Israeli officials say to the Israeli press, but also what US officials say to the US press. And according to Axios, the Biden administration doesn't want the Israelis to invade Rafah on the basis that they can't conduct such an operation without mass civilian casualties. The interesting thing about that report is that apparently, or according to US officials speaking to Axios, they may prohibit US-made weapons from being used by Israel if they go into Rafah. And the second thing is that they may allow the UN Security Council to pass a resolution, a ceasefire resolution, which they have so far vetoed. I think they vetoed it 3 times now. So regarding what can actors do to stop this from happening, the US potentially, theoretically, can allow a ceasefire resolution to go through, and also uses leverage, which no matter what anyone says, it does have, and rather than say putting pressure in the back channels, actually put explicit pressure and start cutting US funding and US weapon supplies to Israel, and restrict their use as well. Now, with the will they, won't they, Politico was also reporting on this issue, and according to US officials speaking to them, they are saying that they would allow an operation into Rafah. They would be fine with it as long as it was a counter-terrorism style operation, so more limited, less of a carpet bombing operation. But to be honest with you, they conducted an operation to secure some hostages about a month ago, I think. And I mean, dozens of civilians were killed in said operation. So, given the density of people that is in Rafah, what difference does it make, really?
I mean, I think the density question is really important because Gaza alone is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Now with 1.5 or 1.8 million? 1.5 million Palestinians seeking shelter in Rafah. That's a crazy population density. I think I heard a statistic that the safe zone, that the area that Israel has declared a safe zone, is the size of Heathrow Airport, and there's 1.5 million people are supposed to go there. There is absolutely no way that you can conduct a safe operation. That's if we give Israel the benefit of the doubt that, any of that is genuine, which I think it's hard to believe after what we've seen the past couple of months, right? So, I think it's very difficult to imagine what would be sufficient pressure internationally on Israel to not conduct a Rafah invasion, because I think Israel has been testing the limits of what it can get away with for 5 months, and it doesn't seem like there are red lines, whether that's for the US, whether that's for Egypt. And I mean, even if we did get to the stage where the US was, calling for a ceasefire at the UN, let's say, absolutely no guarantee that Israel would, adhere to that, would respect that. They have almost never respected anything that the UN has called on them to do.
And a ceasefire, calling for a ceasefire is only as good as the mechanisms to back it up if they don't have a ceasefire.
Which are almost non-existent.
Which are non-existent, yeah. I mean, they can say, don't assault Rafah as much as they like, but something's got to happen if they do that, and that doesn't seem likely, unfortunately. Do you think Israel has the troop numbers to actually commit to an assault on Rafah?
Yeah,
I mean, it would take quite a lot, probably.
Well, I mean, so apparently, the Israelis think that there's 4 Hamas battalions in the city, and that's around 3,000 fighters, right? So there are 2 things that they have to do with these troop numbers. Obviously, they have to fight Hamas, but they also have to, at least what they're supposed to be doing in terms of like pressuring, they have to allow civilians to leave Rafah, right? So they are going to have to, have a lot of soldiers involved in this operation. But they have withdrawn a number of battalions. So actually all of their reservist battalions that they called up initially on October 7th, they have withdrawn from Gaza. And obviously the combat has been very intense, so they've had to withdraw some for rest and refit as well. So it would take time for them to reposition soldiers, battalions, and to basically do a build up prior to any invasion. And I think the United States thinks that such an operation won't happen until after Ramadan, because obviously there's going to be preparation. And as far as I'm aware, they still haven't got a plan of how to get people out of Rafah. So all of these things have to align, and it's going to take a while. So I don't think we're going to see an operation in the near future, really, if we do, and we honestly could do, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we can all hope we don't.
Yeah, but I think it's difficult because if Israel does what it usually does during Ramadan, that would be to escalate. So, I know there were attempts to secure a ceasefire before the start of Ramadan. That didn't happen. The first couple of days of Ramadan have been characterized by bombings. So, I mean, I don't know if we'll see a ground invasion, but I think we certainly can expect more and more violence and kind of unabating bombing.
Yeah, the US and the international community seem pretty happy with that. Just, as long as they keep bombing from the skies, and you can get 20, 30 people killed a day. As long as they don't call it a ground assault and a ground invasion, then
it's not the red line yet.
It's not the red line. The international community would be quite happy with that.
I mean, even Kamala Harris's call for a pause or a 6-week ceasefire is almost like just saying, let's pause until the Democratic primaries are over, Ramadan is over, and then we can keep going.
Yeah. The cynic in me says that this sort of slight shift in US policy might have something to do with the upcoming presidential election.
Oh yeah.
But maybe I'm just a terrible cynic. Who knows?
Maybe.
I think both of those things are true.
Given the state of the primaries that have just happened and the casting ballots for no one, because
they're uncommitted.
Yeah, uncommitted, exactly, uncommitted ballots, and I think the Michigan primary had like over 100,000 uncommitted ballots. I mean, obviously, whether that will do anything, the presidential election is. I'm not going to speculate. I don't look at elections, and I'm not a pollster, but it's significant, and it's actively being debated within Congress and within the regional Democratic parties as well.
For sure. I mean, I think even the port that they're going to build, this, temporary ceasefire call, this supposed red line for a Rafah invasion, all of these are definitely linked to Biden's standing domestically, and he's aware that people are increasingly fed up with his completely unchecked support for Israel. At the same time, I do think that Biden is genuinely, unsure of how to manage Netanyahu, has completely lost his grip over him, and is aware that he is an extreme liability for the U.S. at this stage on an international level in terms of its global reputation, in terms of basically any credibility that it has, whatever shred of credibility it has on the international stage. So I'm sure that I think the U.S. has always, no matter who's in charge, has always expressed publicly complete support for Israel. But I do think that Biden is very aware that, this is a problem, and is probably working behind the scenes to...
But it's his own making, really, because when you look when you look at other U.S. presidents, you're almost shocked at the fact that they've done more than Biden to pressure Israel to stop their operations, like Reagan when the Israelis invaded South Lebanon in '82, and even either Bush or Obama during one of the many now Gaza wars as well. And Reagan is supposed to be this evil guy. What does that make of Biden? I'm not calling Biden evil, but you know what I mean. I
think some people are. Well, actually, yeah. I think,
yeah, that's true. They are, but
you're not.
Well, I'm not going to call anyone evil, unless someone calls me evil, of course.
That's such a British politeness.
Yes, yeah, it's true.
We are nothing at the New Arab Weekly if not polite. Our final story today comes from the UK. Today, as we record on Thursday, March 14th, the current Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, Michael Gove, has unveiled a new definition of extremism, which he has claimed will protect the country's, quote, democratic values, but others have warned will lead to the, quote, unfair targeting of Muslim communities. Speaking in Parliament today, he said this.
The United Kingdom is a success story. A multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy, stronger because of our diversity. But our democracy and our values of inclusivity and tolerance are under challenge from extremist groups which are radicalising our young people and driving greater polarisation within and between communities to further their own ends. In order to protect our democratic values and enhance social cohesion, it is important both to reinforce what we all have in common and to be clear and precise in identifying the dangers posed by extremism.
Speaking in Parliament, he gave 5 examples of groups that could be extremists. The first 2, the British National Socialist Movement, who are neo-Nazis. Pretty fair to call them, I think, extremists. Patriotic Alternative, who are also neo-Nazis. The Muslim Association of Britain, who are reported to have direct ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, who are not popular in the UK Parliament at the moment. CAGE, which is an organisation who on their website they say they provide advice and support, quote, advice and support in diverse civil society responses to harmful war on terror laws and policies around the world. This has included supporting and helping prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. They have had some controversy around them. Mohammed Emwazi, also known as Jihadi John, who was one of the ISIS Beatles, was in contact with CAGE at some point about where he was complaining to them about the treatment that he had received from the British authorities. They described him, unfortunately, as being, quote, extremely kind, gentle and soft-spoken at a press conference, which in hindsight, not great. They later claimed that Emwazi's contact with the UK security services had contributed to his transformation into a killer. The final group was a group called MEND, also known as the Muslim Engagement and Development. According to their website, MEND is a not-for-profit company that helps to empower and encourage British Muslims within local communities to be more actively involved in British media and politics. It is recognised as a representative body for British Muslims with the Independent Press Standards Organisation. They have had some controversies. In 2017, a report claimed that they legitimised the killing of British troops and promoted conspiracy theories. They've also faced accusations about homophobia. They have denied these things. Gove said, we will be holding these and other organisations to account to assess if they meet our definition of extremism and will take appropriate action. That is to say, these groups, which it seems a bit confused, he's given them as examples of extremist groups, but has also said they may not be extremist groups. They're groups that we would want to look at. I think neo-Nazis is pretty clear-cut. It's interesting that the others are certainly, I think, less clear-cut than neo-Nazis. Downing Street has said that a list of organisations covered by the new extremism definition is going to be published in the coming weeks. In response to this, Zahra Mohammed, who is the head of the Muslim Council of Britain, told the BBC that the definition would lead to the, quote, unfair targeting of Muslim communities. The opposition, Angela Rayner was the opposition in Parliament. They are fairly all right with it, generally speaking, although they did question whether Gove is certain that the new definition won't affect gender-critical groups, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental groups, and those exercising their right to free speech.
Why now? Why is the government, looking into these organisations now specifically?
Well, again, call me a cynic, but this might have something to do with the fact that there is going to be a general election in the UK this year. Maybe. I mean, I think it is, let's say, I think it is a policy that would appeal to the right wing of the country, the right wing that the Conservative government, the current Conservative government, are at threat of losing to the likes of Reform UK, who are probably not going to win any seats in Parliament because of the mad way that our electoral system is run, but does have the potential to cause trouble for Conservatives in a number of key election seats. So I think this could play well with those people who might think about voting for reform. I mean, it does also seem like an odd election policy. When you're so unpopular, let's try and sort of swing our popularity by by increasingly extreme policies.
I mean, I think the government was pretty open that this was also quite directly in response to the increased kind of protest movements that we've seen since October 7th.
Well, I mean, when it comes to Michael Gove, he has form. It's Michael Gove that's pushing through the anti-BDS bill. Yeah. So between pro-Palestinian protests, which are still continuing in London and have angered a lot of Conservative MPs, and including Michael Gove, and the anti-BDS bill, which Michael Gove is pushing through, the guy's got form when it comes to this sort of stuff.
And I think the other similarity that we see with the anti-BDS bill is that it's kind of singling out, Muslim/Arab communities specifically, right? In the BDS bill, Israel is specifically mentioned as a country that you cannot boycott. Here, 3 of the organizations mentioned are directly related to Muslims, Arabs in the UK. And I think it sets a precedent. I mean, I know that Gove said that this would not be expanded, kind of gave that, reassurance that this is not going to be expanded to include environmental groups or, gender rights campaigners, I think it would be a bit naive to believe him. I think what we're going to see with both this bill and the anti-BDS bill is that it could very easily be expanded to target more groups that the government is fed up with. Things like, Just Stop Oil, that they've expressed a lot of criticism over for the past several years.
That was a concern that was raised by Labour MPs, but also, not all Conservative MPs are happy about this. Some of them, are so big onto sort of free speech absolutism that they're not really gelling with this either. And I think you make a good point, Dean. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are sort of hot button issues currently. Who is to say what will be unpopular with the governments of the future, and whether this definition is then expanded to include, people who don't like puppies or people who really like, cheeseburgers. Probably not that, but I think it makes the point.
No, but I did see someone commenting that, if this could theoretically be used against some of the Conservative government's own policies. For example, the Rwanda bill, right? That definitely undermines the UK's democratic or liberal democratic values, which is the new definition of, right? I think the change in the definition is essentially that, whereas before the definition implied that there had to be some kind of action, now it's kind of the ideological promotion of things that undermine the UK's values. So yeah, it's definitely possible that it will be expanded.
Well, also one thing that's seems quite disconcerting about this is there doesn't seem to be an appeals process. So the government can say you're an extremist, and that's the final ruling. Kit Malthouse, Conservative MP, expressed some alarm about this. He asked Michael Gove whether there was really no appeals process over the branding, and he said that this was going to have a, quote, chilling impact broadly in society. He asked at what stage groups would be able to present a defence to say, actually we're not extremists, which I think is fair. Anybody should be able to sort of to make an argument. He also asked that if an MP disagrees with the definition and then works with a blacklisted group, will the government then refuse to engage with them? Which I think, someone like Just Stop Oil, who, if the government says they're extremists and then particularly Green MP works with Just Stop Oil or has a meeting with them or hears them out or attends something or gives a speech, does that make your local MP an extremist?
Yeah, it's very hard not to see how this is an extension of what the Conservatives have been doing over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Regarding, in particular, the crackdown on climate protesters and the labelling of them as extremists, but also, categorising far left, activists who, hold said quote unquote, like Marxist leanings as being, extremists. I think listing Antifa, but also gender identity activists as well. I can't remember. This might have been last year now, but there were a whole host of different quote unquote ideologies that were deemed as being extremist, and quite a few of them were absurd, actually. You could say that an Antifa person is an extremist on the basis that they hold a quite far left opinion, but then to characterize them as being, scrutinizing them in the same way that, a neo-Nazi or someone who would actively, choose violence, political violence, and putting them on the same level, I think that's a bit far-fetched, but it's something the government has, been, sort of adopting and creating this sort of narrow centre ground and trying to represent it, even though they have problems of extremism with their own party. Especially the comments that have happened over the last couple of days, regarding
this is the Tory donor.
The Tory donor, yeah.
There's a Tory donor and
Frank Hester,
and there was also Lee Anderson as well,
who has gone to Reform and is now their first MP. Maybe their last. I don't know.
Congratulations
and I think
to Reform.
There is so much fuss now since October 7th among the Conservatives, not just the Conservatives, but specifically the Conservatives, about this being I think it was called specifically, quote, a radicalizing moment, right, where, you know, young Arabs and Muslims here in the UK are extremely upset at their government support for Israel, and so they're worried that this might, you know, make them more susceptible to extremist tendencies. I don't actually dispute that might be true, right? I think people are so angry with the government, rightfully so, and this does kind of create the conditions that make people ripe to then be more open to these kind of extremist ideologies. I just think it's so absurd to think that this is the right approach to take, right? Rather than, you know, any kind of outreach, it's just extra criminalization, extra kind of marginalization. I mean, now we're probably going to see tons of more money being poured into things like Prevent. Initiatives like the anti-BDS bill, initiatives like this one.
Someone who agrees with you, Nadine, is London Mayor Sadiq Khan, whether you want him to or not. He told the BBC, quote, "My concern is some of the people we engage with in some of our programmes, which work with young people, whether it's those who may be going down the path of the extreme far right, whether it's those who may be going down the path of the Islamist. My worry is by labelling these groups, many local authorities, mayors, public authorities won't engage with them and they'll go underground," which I think is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when governments like take down web pages, or actually not necessarily governments, although they have done before, but also like online companies take down web pages.
And you just push them into a more extreme.
Yeah, push them into Telegram, which is just as accessible as a platform, but also not as not able to be better regulated, right? At the end of the day, people are going to find this sort of information one way or another. In this digital age, you can't really censor anything anymore, really. But it's a matter of regulating and also, you know, being open to convince people otherwise about the opinions that they hold. And I think really liberal democracy, you know, if that's the cornerstone of the definition, but also of our society, is all about, you know, debate and open debate, right? And about challenging viewpoints. That's part of the democratic process. Parliament is the arena for that.
Before we go, a couple of other stories that have come out over the past 7 days. One here, Israel says Eurovision accepts new entry after lyrics edit. Do we have any hope that Israel's song will be anything but political?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Ollie, any hope for Eurovision not being so political?
Well, Eurovision's inherently political, isn't it?
It is.
So...
another one, Egypt's central bank floats Egyptian pound against US dollar. Egypt's central bank has allowed market forces to determine the value of the local currency. It would seem that market forces determine the value of the local currency to be almost nothing. This is a good idea, do we think? Is it going to help Egypt at all?
I mean, I'm not hopeful. Egypt is doing this in a desperate attempt to get the IMF loan. Inflation is skyrocketing right now.
39%, I think.
Yeah.
35.
I mean, Egypt is also like selling parts of its land. Not hopeful.
You going to buy a bit of Egypt, Ollie?
If I had the
pyramids,
money.
a pyramid.
No,
I think it's going quite cheap, you know.
The only ones that have the money are the UAE, and I'm not as rich as them.
You're not? Oh, okay. Finally, Trump, Biden win enough delegates for presidential rematch. Who's excited? Who's got election fever? Or are we all just exasperated and a little bit nervous?
I think I have election dread.
Dread.
I feel like I'm living in it's like the worst deja vu.
Yeah.
You know how I said I wasn't a pollster? I'm still not, but I definitely will be watching the election.
How can you not, right?
Like you said, Nadine, out of dread. Yeah.
But with sort of between a gap between your fingers over your eyes, I think. Yeah. A lot of good stuff on the New Arab's website this week. Ollie, you've brought something you think is pretty good and worth checking out?
Yep. The title is Syria Insight. HTS's litany of errors piles pressure on Idlib. And it's by our senior news editor, Paul McLaughlin. and it basically runs down the internal politics of Idlib. And I know this is a bit niche, but Syria is still a conflict. The fragility within Syria is very much there, and the balance of power is obviously, is quote unquote quiet, but maybe not for long. So yeah, check it out.
Nadine?
Sure. So my article of the week is an opinion piece for International Women's Day called "Why Are Israeli Soldiers Obsessed with Gaza Women's Underwear?" It's by one of our regular voices on the opinion desk, Nadine Asbali. And essentially it takes a look at this sickening, horrible phenomenon we've seen recently of Israeli soldiers rummaging through Palestinian women's lingerie and holding it up in some kind of, gross conquest imagery. And kind of ask the question, where are all these Western feminists that preach sexual freedom and, bodily autonomy when it comes to this pretty gross trend and speaking up for Palestinian women for International Women's Day?
Well worth a read. Good piece from me. It's on the analysis desk. How a bill to draft ultra-Orthodox Jews could bring down Israel's government. As you may be aware, ultra-Orthodox Jews have always been exempt from military service, but a new bill could change that and also threatens to bring down the Israeli government in the process. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the New Arab Weekly. We were joined by our opinions editor, Nadine Talat, and journalist Oliver Mizzi, who are both on social media. So, Nadine, they can get in touch with you how?
On Twitter, it's Nadine_Talat. On X.
That's both are fine. Both are fine, I think. And Ollie?
Yeah, my handle is Ollie Mizzi 99. That's OLLYMIZZI 99.
We will be back next week and every Friday after that. Our other podcast, The New Arab Voice, will also be returning shortly. We will be moving the release date of that from a Friday to a Wednesday. So that will now be coming out on Wednesdays. You can subscribe to The New Arab Voice and this podcast, The New Arab Weekly, on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts, and be notified when a new episode drops. Until then, if you have any questions for us or stories that you would like us to cover, drop us an email. podcast@newarab.com. That is podcast@newarab.com. In particular, questions. Or you can find us on social media @TNA Podcasts for all the latest news. You can subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Don't forget to follow The New Arab on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for all the latest news, analysis and opinion from the region.